near and my time has come. Still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. Again, please sing the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. I worship Your holy name. Lord, I worship Your holy
Amen. How's everybody doing this morning? Wonderful. It's good to see everybody. I've missed everybody. I feel like it's been longer than a week since I've been here. Maybe that's because of everything I've got going on or whatever, but it seems like it's been about 2 or 3 weeks since I've been here. But it's good to be back. I'm really glad and excited about what's going on here. So, I want to tell you guys a story about these 2 little boys. And they were brothers. One was 8 and one was 10. Now these little boys were mischievous little boys. Okay, anytime there was any trouble in their community or in their hometown, their parents knew that these boys were involved in some shape, form, or fashion, and so did everybody else in the community. They were well known for their troublemaking. So the parents were at their wits' end. They didn't know what to do with the kids, and they had heard about this minister that was really good with troubled kids, and he had a very high success rate working with troubled kids and helping them out and straightening them out, so to speak. And so the mom talked to the dad and said, should we send them to this pastor? And Dad said, if you don't, I'm going to kill them. I'm about to lose my cool, and it's going to get ugly. So this man is probably their last hope, because they're about to meet Jesus. So Mom calls the minister, and he agrees to see the boys, but he wants to see them one at a time. And he wants to see the youngest one first. So the 8-year-old walks into the minister's office, and he sits down, and the pastor looks at him, and he says, where is God? And the little boy just sits there, and he's not responding. And the minister gets upset, and he gets a little irritated, and he said, son, where is God? The little boy doesn't respond. He just sits there stone-faced, and the man gets really irritated. He goes, young man, I asked you a question. Where is God? Well, this kid jumps up and runs out of the office, and he runs all the way home, and he runs into the house, and he runs through, and he runs past his brother, and he runs into the closet, and he closes the door. And his brother goes in there and says, what happened? What's wrong? And he said, man, we're in big trouble now. God is missing, and they think we've done it. Sounds like my brother. I'm just saying. Anybody have that friend you've gotten into a lot of trouble with? And yeah, we all had one of those growing up. I was one of those. I was probably that 8-year-old boy. My brother and I, we always started trouble and got into a lot of trouble. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to read out of John chapter 4. And I'm going to start on verse 4. He had to go through Samaria on the way, and eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, please give me a drink. Okay, now Jesus is tired, and he's hanging out by this well. And I'm going to try to give you a little background here. This Samaritan woman comes up, and it's noontime. Now, that was unusual because all the women gathered and they drew water early in the morning in the cool of the day. And it was a real social event for these ladies. I mean, imagine these ladies. This is like the only time they get to chat with their friends. You know how we chat over coffee or we hang out with our friends at the coffee shop? Well, this was their moment. This is what they did every day. They came to draw water, and it was a real social event. So it was really unusual for this woman to be coming at noon, which says a lot about her. She probably wanted to avoid them. She was probably an outcast among her people. And so when she's walking up, she's not expecting to see anybody. That's why she comes at noontime. She doesn't want to associate with anybody. She doesn't want to see anybody. So she's a little shocked to see someone sitting at the well. And the closer she gets and she realizes this is a Jew, she's especially shocked. Because, let me give you a little bit of history between the Jews and the Samaritans. They hated each other. They hated each other. They despised one another because the Samaritans, there were a lot of mixed marriages going on, and the Samaritans married outside of their race, and then they began to worship different idols. So they worshiped God, and they had this idolatry going on, and the Jews just thought that they were unclean, and they were an abomination, and they were beneath them. And so normally, when a Jew traveled from Judea to Galilee, they would bypass Samaria and cross the Jordan because they were worried about being contaminated just by walking through the land. That's how much the Jews hated the Samaritans and vice versa. So when she walks up and there's this man sitting there, and he's a Jew sitting there, she's thinking this is turning into a strange day, a bad day. Well, she walks up and this man, this Jewish man, asks her for some water. First, Jews don't talk to women anyway. It's against their culture. They don't talk to Samaritans. So imagine what she's thinking. This man is asking me for some water. She's probably thinking his motives are not very pure. Seriously. I mean, imagine. I mean, think about it. She's this outcast. She's got this reputation. So she's probably thinking that he's got some pretty bad motives. So immediately her mind starts and she goes on to the defense. Well, Jesus started introducing himself a little bit at a time, and I'm going to pick back up where I left off. At verse, 8. He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with the Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And that's when her mind's rolling around thinking, what does this man want? What is he doing? Because there's obviously something that's not good going on. I mean, that's where our minds think, right? I mean, that's what I would have thought. And Jesus replied, and this is where he starts introducing himself a little bit at a time. "If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me and I would give you living water. But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket," she said, "and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?" And Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I will give will never be thirsty again." Jesus is a gentleman. He's a gentleman. And he never forces himself on anyone. Did he force himself on you? No, we had to ask. We had to ask for the gift of grace. We had to ask for the living water. We had to ask for our salvation. It's just what we have. That's the only thing we have to do. That's the only requirement that Jesus has, is we have to ask. So he knew this, and he knew that she had to ask. And the next verse says, let's see. "Please, sir," the woman said, "give me this water." And it was in that moment that Jesus really started to minister to her. And he started to reveal himself to her a little bit more and a little bit more. And I'm going to finish reading this because it's really good. He says, "Go and get your husband," Jesus told her. "I don't have a husband," the woman replied. Jesus said, "You're right. You don't have a husband, for you've had 5 husbands. and you're not even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth." So Jesus started revealing himself to her, and her eyes started opening up, and she started to recognize him for who he really was. And she recognized him as the Messiah, and she recognized him as a prophet, and she was really, really excited. And meanwhile, you've got to remember the disciples had went into the city to buy some food. So as they're coming back from Samaria, from the city, they see Jesus sitting here, and he's talking to this woman, this Samaritan woman. So I'm not even going to imagine what's going on in their minds. There's no telling what they're thinking, but they didn't say anything. They just walked up with their almonds and fish or whatever they decided to go get. And the woman, she's having this revelation about who Jesus Christ is. And she drops everything, and she takes off, runs right past the disciples, and she runs right into the city. Well, the disciples, wondering what's going on, walked up to Jesus, and they said, "Lord, eat something." And I'm going to pick up on verse 31. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, "Rabbi, eat." But he said to them, "I have another food to eat, which you do not know." It's interesting. He sent them into the city for food, but I think they misunderstood what he meant. I think they totally misunderstood him. Therefore the disciples said to one another, Has anyone brought him anything to eat? And Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me, and to finish his work. Do you not say there are still 4 months, and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white with harvest." Jesus' disciples. This is the first Christian congregation. They went into this city. And this city was full of broken people. This city was full of unsaved people. This city was full of what they considered to be undesirables. And you know what they did? They came back with some nuts and some fish. They didn't even recognize the harvest. They walked into this place, and they had everything that these people needed. Everything. They had hope. They had eternal life. They had the living water. They had Jesus Christ. Everything that these people needed. And because of a mindset, they walked right past them. And they didn't even perceive what was going on. But this woman, this outcast, this abomination, went into the same city that the disciples walked into. And she came back with what Jesus sent the disciples in to begin with. She came back with people. She came back with a multitude of people. You see, she went into this city, and all she did was tell them her story. She went in there and she told them, "Hey, I've had 5 husbands, and I'm shacking up with this dude, and Jesus knew all about it, and you know what? He loves me anyway." And she went in and she told them this story. That's all she did. She gave them her testimony. And then she told them about Jesus. You see, the thing about it is this woman goes into this community, and these are her people. They're her people. They can connect with her. She spoke their language. They understood her. You see, the people in that city understood the rejection that the Samaritans had felt from the Jews and the other peoples in the land. So there was a connection, there was a kinship between them. So she goes in and she comes back with a revival. She revolutionized that city. She come back with all these people, and she introduced them to Jesus. They needed to hear from her. I hear people say often, "I feel like God's called me. I feel like I'm supposed to do something for God, and I feel like I have a call on my life, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. Do I need to go to school? Do I need to get educated? What do I need to do?" Let me tell you something. God sent this woman who was not only an outcast among the Jews, but she was an outcast among her own people. But God used her to revolutionize an entire people, to save an entire people, to save her people. I read a meme the other day that said, when you find people who not only tolerate your quirks, but they celebrate them with glad cries of, me too, me too, you should celebrate those people and cherish those people, because those weirdos are your tribe. I use that term a lot. That's my tribe. The other night when we had our final dress rehearsal, a lot of the Dandelion Project people were there. I looked out and I saw my people out there. My cast members, they were like, is that your people? I'm like, that's my tribe. That's my tribe out there. And I was so excited and I was so proud to see all of y'all out there. And I was like, they're going to be a great crowd and they're going to laugh and they're going to encourage us. And I was so proud that my people, my tribe had shown up. And I was bragging on y'all. And I want to read, Seth Godwin says, a tribe is a group of people connected to one another and connected to an idea. For millions of years, human beings have been part of one tribe or another. A group needs only two things to be a tribe: a shared interest and a way to communicate. You see, you speak a language. You speak a language that communicates perfectly to the people that God has called you to. How many of you have ever heard someone tell a story and it was so similar to yours, and something happened and there was a connection that you can't make with other people? There's a kinship, there's something that happens, and that's what happened when the Samaritan woman went into her people to see her people. They connected with her because their stories were similar. They were related. God's called you to your tribe, to your people. I think we often discount our giftings or our callings because we don't have, an ordination, or we don't have a title. We're not pastors. We're not this, we're not that. But I'm going to tell you something. God used uneducated fishermen. We've already talked about that. God used imperfect people. And He uses us. Now that Samaritan woman knew her people. She knew what they needed. She knew their hearts. She knew their needs. She knew them. She understood them. And she brought them out and introduced them to Jesus. What city are you from? What language do you speak? What people are you called to? How many disciples have walked past you just to gather some nuts? Don't leave it up to some disciples from another land to reach your people. Bring them in. We're called to this city. We're called to these people. These are our people. We have to reach these people, and all you have to do is tell them your story. That's all you have to do. Let me tell you something. You don't have to speak Christianese. I hate it. I despise it when somebody comes at me speaking Christian. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. And Jesus didn't say to this Samaritan woman, I want you to be a Jew. I want you to be a perfect Jew, and I want you to be this, and I want you. No, He's sitting her in just like she was, speaking the language that she's always spoken, to be herself, to reach her people. Jesus doesn't want you to change who you are. He wants you to reach the people that can connect to you. Don't come at me speaking Christianese. I don't want to hear it. Because oftentimes when we do that, it's like we elevate ourselves, like the Jews had elevated themselves above the Samaritans. And sometimes when people come at you speaking Christianese and they're trying to impress you with their knowledge and their words, their biblical words, and their lingo, it almost makes you feel less than. It does me. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. You see, Jesus says in Matthew 25, whatever you do for the least of these, you do unto me. Now I want you to understand something. The Samaritan woman was not lesser. She was not less important than the Jewish people. I was, when I had my ministry, my recovery ministry over in all, we were in a meeting one night, and there was this woman, and she was probably in her mid-40s, and she was a prostitute, and she was a crack addict. And we're having the meeting, and she jumps up and she says, "This is too much, this is too much," and she starts to gather her things, and I said, "Too much what, honey?" She said, "Too much God." And she gathered her stuff, and she marched out, and I thought, oh my God, I was like devastated that she walked out. I thought I will never get the opportunity to minister to this woman again. And I was grieved over the fact that she walked out, and I don't know, I felt like I missed an opportunity with this woman. Well, about a week or so later, I was sitting in my office, and she walked in, and she was crying, and she said, "Ever since that meeting last week, I don't know, God's been dealing with me. I don't know what's going on with me, but will you please pray for me?" And I said, "Certainly." And we went into the sanctuary, and we sat down at the altar. She was just weeping and just trembling. And I put my arms around her, and she was so frail and so thin from the drugs that I could feel her ribs, and I could feel her backbone. And she was just weeping and crying. And it was in that moment that this verse came to my mind, and I realized that I had my arms around Jesus Christ. Not because this woman, this prostitute, was less than, or she was the least of these. She wasn't. She was very important. Society had made her lesser, had categorized her as the least of these. And this verse right here, Jesus put this verse right here in the Bible, not because he thought there were least of these or there were lesser people, but because he knew about our prejudices and our biases. So he made a very clear point to say, hey, those people that you think are lesser, that are synonymous with the lesser, that are the least of these, those are the ones. Those are the ones that I want you to run after. Because you're going to walk through their city, and because you have a bias or you have some kind of mindset, you're going to walk right past them. But I'm telling you that when you go into a place and you reach out to the society least of these, you're reaching out to me. The disciples had walked into an entire city of the least of these, and they came out with some nuts and some fish. You are called to some people that many may consider lesser or the least of these. But remember, when you love them and you minister to them, you're ministering to Jesus Christ. And God has called us to revolutionize our city and our people. It's our tribe. That's our tribe. God's doing something, and he wants us to reach our people. It's time for us to go into our city and tell our stories and introduce people to Jesus. That day at that altar with that woman, I was able to introduce her to Jesus that day. She gave her life to the Lord that day. I don't know what happened to her after that. I never saw her again. But you know what? I did my part. And I do believe with everything in me that that woman went out to her people and her tribe, and she told her story. And she told her people what Jesus did for her. And I believe that's what we're called to do. We're all called to reach our people and just tell our story. It's really that simple. And we get to introduce them to Jesus. So let's build this place and let's reach this city.